faces.
All right. So if anyone's nervous about being on the recording, feel free to put your video away. This is just going to be on a private YouTube link that we're going to send out to our email list. So um, I promise it's not going to go anywhere weird. But no shame in making your video be off if that's what you want. You can also leave it on. We are just here to have fun. So Kerry, do you want to kick us off?
Well, yeah, I just want to say hi. Hi, everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces and also some new faces to me anyway. Welcome to our first Shadows and Secrets webinar. We're going to be doing one of these a month for the next several months. So you guys are getting in right on the ground floor. Excellent time to join us. Thank you very much. Yeah, all right, Sam, I'll let you do the official welcome.
All right. Same. Hi, everyone. I see some familiar faces too. And thank you so much for being here. This is our first one. And Kerry and I were like, we really hope somebody shows up. So it's great that you're here. Thank you. So welcome. This is, as Kerry said, the first of our series of craft-focused webinars. We're going to have a series of topics. Kerry and I love nerding out about this stuff. And we really feel strongly that all of this should just be out there and available. So all of these sessions will be recorded and available for free. Today's topic is going to be twists, which if you've worked with me, you know is probably my most favorite thing to talk about. And in April, Kerry is going to be leading us through project management for writers, which is her superpower and something I definitely benefit from as her co-founder. And that will be on Tuesday, April 16th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. And we'll send out the link and the reminder of everything. I promise it'll be I'll give you a little more heads up than we did for this time. That was 100% my fault. So apologies that it was very last minute, but thank you all so much for being here.
So who are we? I think probably many of you know one or the other or both of us, but I am Kerry Savage, and this is my co-founder, Samantha Skal. We are both Author Accelerator certified book coaches, and we are obsessed with mysteries, thrillers, and suspense. We love scary fiction. We love twists. We love talking about it and thinking about it and writing it. So we love all of those things. And we decided we were talking about the kind of ideal writing retreat that we would want to attend. And we kind of looked at each other and said, well, why don't we just make it? So we decided to do that. And that's where Shadows and Secrets was born.
Indeed, at a writing conference, not Thriller Fest, another one, but yes. We'll go into a bit more details about the actual retreat in a bit, but first we're going to introduce ourselves for those of you that don't know one or the other of us. So I am Samantha Skal. I focus on mystery, thriller, and suspense. That is what I read. It is what I coach. That's what I write. I do novel planning all the way through revision, all the way through writing forward, all the way through agent pitching. It's just the world that I adore living in, and the more murder, the better, which makes my friends a little nervous for me, but the writer people all really deeply understand. My superpower is twist brainstorming. I have never met a twist I couldn't logic my way out of, and I really adore talking about this. I am the co-executive director of Thriller Fest. If you came on a few minutes early, you heard Frank. I know, Olivia, you've been a few times. It's a fantastic conference. It happens in New York at the end of May, early June every year, and highly recommend attending if you can swing it. It's really fun. I used to run Pitch Fest at Thriller Fest, which is why I'm obsessed with agents and that whole process as well. I find synopses to be an absolute delight, which makes me by far and away a very small portion of the population. I love cheese, good red wine, canned corn. That's my fun fact for today, is that I think canned corn is amazing and I will put it on everything, much to my husband's dismay. And rainy day kayaking.
So I'm Kerry. Hello to everyone I haven't met. My focus is on helping novelists of many genres. I don't just do mystery, thriller, and suspense, because as some of you who have worked with me before know, like I'm kind of a magpie, and honestly, like I love MTS very, very much, but I would probably get really bored because I have the attention span sometimes of a gnat. Thank you, neurodivergent brain. But I work with people from the planning stages all the way through revisions. I don't really do a lot of pitch work, although I will certainly work with some people that if I'm familiar with your project, I'm happy to help out in those areas. My superpower beyond project management, which I have a love-hate relationship with, to be totally frank, is synthesizing plot and character and just asking a lot of questions. So again, anyone who's worked with me before probably would be rolling their eyes right now because I just ask question after question after question. But trying to get you to think through all the pieces of your story and brainstorming and all of that is where I love to nerd out. I am also a WFWA, which is the Women Fiction Writers Association mentor, and I'm also a Sisters in Crime mentor. So love doing that kind of stuff too. I also love cheese and good wine, not just red. I like good wine of all varieties. My husband owns a wine and cheese shop. So my joke, not joke, is that I am their quality assurance tester, which is a real tough job. And my fun fact is that I am currently keeping 4 generations of aloe plants alive.
It's fantastic.
Very proud of that because otherwise I don't really have a green thumb. So
Yes, I've been slowly switching myself over to plastic pants that look real because it's easier, even though I love plants. So there's another fun fact. Okay, so what is Shadows and Secrets? Shadows and Secrets is, again, this retreat that Kerry and I dreamed up because this is the one we wanted to go to. It's going to be 5 days, 3 full days, and then a travel day on either side, but there'll be arrival on the evening of and then departure on the morning of, where we have some bonding time. And it is focused on mystery, thriller, and suspense authors looking for a transformation on their work in progress. So what we mean by that, we're going to go into it in just a second, but we're looking for people who are really excited to dive in and do the work. Whether you're beginner or super expert, it kind of doesn't matter. We're just looking for people to bring their projects and be willing to move with us through this transformation for the weekend and do a lot of hard work and have a lot of fun. We're limiting it to 12 people plus us, so the 14 in total. It's going to be this September 25th to 29th in Salem, Massachusetts' most haunted hotel. So if that does not appeal to you, then perhaps maybe not the best fit, but Kerry and I really love ghosts and we love thinking about it. I'm still not sure what I actually think about ghosts, but I'm willing to give it a shot. Hopefully I'll be able to sleep. Applications are going to open on April 1st. And if you're here, you receive the email for this webinar, you'll receive the notice when those actually go up on the website. And that is our website in case you have not found it yet.
So who are we looking for? We are looking for you if you're mystery, thriller, suspense, or MTS. You'll see that abbreviation a lot because we're all about efficiency. Yeah. But if you're an MTS curious or you are already an MTS author, this is a perfect fit for you. We're obviously like going to nerd out on all things MTS. You have ideally written a full-length novel. You do not have to have published it. I think the reason that we're using that as some kind of a marker is because we're looking for people who have an idea of what it means to write a book and understand all of the work and the hardships that go into that and all the difficulties. And we're going to try to lessen some of those. That's part of the goal of the retreat. But we want people who are serious, that you're willing to put in the work. We have built-in downtime in the schedule for this retreat, but we are planning on getting a lot of work done. So that's why we want people who are really serious about making some significant progress. So if you ask the Hawthorne Hotel, they will tell you it's not haunted. They have to say that, I'm sure. But there's a lot, if you Google it, there are stories of people who have seen ghosts on certain floors. So, I mean, the reason we picked Salem is because it's Salem. It's a very spooky, wonderfully witchy place. It's got some great vibes. There's a lot of fun things to do that we will be leading if you so choose to go on. Like we're going to do a walking tour at night of like some murder and spooky suspense stuff. So just know that. I think probably if you write about this stuff, it probably doesn't faze you, but if it does, that's totally cool. Just know that that's where we're staying. We aim to be wildly inclusive. We're no jerks is sort of how we're putting things, which maybe says it all, but we want this to be a safe space for everybody. So that is our goal. That's who we are as people and what we embrace. And so we're looking for other like-minded people that way. And whether you are a plotter or a pantser, consider yourself welcome here as well. That's part of the wildly inclusive, but just know that part of this is we will be doing a lot of planning work because both Sam and I believe in that. It doesn't always have to happen before you start writing. If you can benefit from it at any stage. So there, I've rambled on long enough about that.
Like we said, we're aiming for this to be really fun. Kerry and I both cuss. If that is a problem, you can ask us to stop, but it's going to be hard. So hopefully that is not something that deeply offends you. I don't know, a quick question. Kerry, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you actually see the whole screen? Mine is cut off partway. I don't want people to lose out on the text.
No, I can see the whole slide, so I think we're
Everyone
good.
can see the whole screen. Okay, cool. It's just me. That's great. So I'm gonna try to remember what I wrote here. So there's going to be optional wine, where there are going to be new writer friends made. The whole goal is to bring a group of like-minded weirdos who love to write about murder together for a writing retreat, and get us all to have a whole bunch of new friends. Similar to the conference vibe, but much more focused, and we're going to get to know each other, and it's going to be a blast. We're going to focus on brainstorming solutions as opposed to rewriting. Kerry and I both believe very firmly that rewriting a story because you get stuck is not the only way. There are other ways to get out of that, and typically it already lies within your story. I have had great success with this. Kerry has had great success with this, coaching me and other people on how to get through. And we really feel that this is a thing that needs to be explored further, because there's a lot of good advice out there and potentially bad advice that says that, if you get stuck, you should give up. And we don't believe that. So we're going to do deep dives into your characters. We're going to do twist brainstorming. We're going to do unblocking exercises. And the goal of the retreat is that you walk away with a completed, revised, or from scratch outline with 3 twists. And so that is what we're putting out there, and that is our plan, and that's what we hope to do for each and every one of you.
Yes, so thank you for listening to our little understanding about what shadows and secrets is. And now we are going to get into the twisty twist. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm largely going to hand it over to Sam, but I will be jumping in where I have something to say, and I almost always have something to say. So sorry, Sam, in advance, but we're going to cover twists. What are twists? Why are twists important? What makes a good one? And then we're going to open it up and have time for questions. So you guys can feel free to ask us anything, AMA.
Yeah. And also on the presentation, if you have questions you want to ask, just pop them in the chat and we'll go through them at the end.
Yep.
So what are twists? If you have seen me talk about this before, most recently, this has been the definition I've been using because I find it to be sort of eye-opening in the way that the world is approaching twists, and particularly the writers that I've been working with. So in MTS, the villain's journey is experienced by the protagonist. And I will explain more about what I mean by that. But first, I want you to picture like a piece of cardboard like this, and turned on its side. Your protagonist is cruising along the top, experiencing the story, and what's underneath, that was a terrible thing. This is still the same piece of cardboard. The villain is underneath, moving through the story as well. And when they poke up through the surface, so picture like a push pin coming up to the surface of the cardboard, those little indents, those little pricks through the protagonist's journey, those are twists. Those are clues. Those are the only way that the protagonist is going to figure out what's actually going on with the villain underneath. And I will go much more into this, but just hold this cardboard metaphor in your head for now. So in this way, twists are the reveal of the villain's truth. And they are twisty because the truth is unexpected to the protagonist and the reader. And they're unexpected because the protagonist made incorrect but logical assumptions about what was going on. So as they're bopping through the story, they're seeing this clue poking up, and they're thinking, oh, that open window is not because, someone broke in and is lurking in my closet or under my bed right now. It's because I left the window open. Logical, it makes sense, but they're also incorrect, right? Because obviously, if we're writing a thriller, that's exactly what happened. So the villain's journey, when I say that MTS is the villain's journey as experienced by the protagonist, this is what the true villain is actually doing. It's usually off screen, which is below the level of this cardboard. And the POV character, your protagonist typically, but you can have multiple POVs experiencing that, translate and experience the story for the reader. And so the reader is going to go along with what your protagonist is experiencing on the page. They're going to make assumptions just like the protagonist will. They're going to have the same filters as the protagonist. And the protagonist, the whole story, because again, we're writing MTS, is going to be trying to think who this true villain actually is. And they're going to be wrong for much of the story until we end up planning when they actually reveal their full truth at the very, very end. These are red herrings. This is misdirection. This is why I love mystery, thriller, and suspense, is because you can have all kinds of very logical assumptions about what's going on. And these twists and turns as the protagonist moves through the story, that's what makes it twisty. What do I mean by true villain? This is the ultimate person doing the bad thing. That could be stealing something. It could be full-on serial killer. It could be something in between. But they will not stop at anything to achieve their goals, and they have a very logical reason for doing what they're doing. So if you think about, I don't know, your standard serial killer, not as interesting if we don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. And so we need to understand what their logic is, what their motivation is, and it's all going to be revealed at the very end, right? Because it's, again, mystery, thriller, and suspense. We're not going to know anything until we decide as the author to reveal it in that final twist moment or in the climactic twist. But when we understand our villains deeply, they become much more interesting. They become much more engaging to the reader. The assumed villain could be somebody that the reader faces, the protagonist faces in the climactic scene, or it could be someone that the protagonist is making a logical assumption about that they are the true villain. But they could be framed by the ultimate villain, the true villain. They could have been hired by the true villain. And the protagonist is going to be bopping along to the story, making assumptions. And if those are your red herrings, those are your going off on a hard left turn that's completely incorrect, but serves to make your middle much more interesting for the reader. The true villain's identity is not revealed until the climactic or sometimes the final twist. And so I'm not going to make any spoilers today. Kerry and I did a deep dive into this book by Taylor Adams that came out, I don't know, Kerry, 6 months ago, maybe?
Sounds about right. It's the
Yeah,
last one.
it's called The Last Word. Read it and then watch our
Definitely
deep
read
dive.
it because we spoiled the hell out of it.
Yep, and then watch our deep dive. And he is a masterclass level in twists. So that's all I'll say about that, so I don't spoil anything. So typical twist structure, this is pretty common knowledge, but there's a midpoint twist. If you watch thrillers on TV, particularly, or anything that's labeled as a thriller on TV, if you pause it right where they have that oh, wait, it's not that, it's this, it will be at 50%. And it is wild how accurate that is. Same thing with the climactic twist and the final twist, which I will show. But these percentages do matter. They get into genre expectations for the reader. When a reader picks up MTS, they want to be scared. They want to be pulled into the story. They're expecting some twists. And so it is our job as authors to give it to them. So your midpoint twist, it's often called a midpoint turn, or, there's all kinds of ways of referring to it. But basically, this is new information that proves previous assumptions incorrect. It's also the place that the protagonist cannot go backwards out of the story, right? They can't just be like, oh, I'm out. I'm going to go, vacation in Hawaii now. They're dedicated. They're going to go and see this through and go into this climactic scene. Oftentimes in MTS, this can be a shift to a new prime suspect. If somebody is assuming something from 0% to 50%, this could be where they find out that person is dead, for example. That's a real classic for a reason. It could be that they find that information that proves that they couldn't have done the thing, and so they're shifting to a new suspect. And oftentimes that new suspect is not actually the true villain either, because again, we're building these twists, and what we have actually going on beneath the surface is what the true villain is doing. The climactic twist is somewhere between 80 and 85. I recently saw one that was 87, which just sort of blew my mind because so often it's between 80 and 85. This is tied to the emotional aha moment for the protagonist. So MTS, not as well known for emotional development, right? But I do feel strongly that when we have characters that are very, very engaging, it's because we are relating to them on an emotional level and we're seeing them grow. And so we'll talk a whole lot more about emotional ahas in the retreat and in future craft webinars. But this is basically that moment where the person thinks oh, I am worthy of love, or I can do this, I am strong enough, and faces their misbelief that they've had about themselves this entire time. And then that leads them to be able to tackle the climactic scene. And so you can think of this as almost what do they need to get through the climactic scene? What do they need to understand about themselves? What do they need to believe in order to do this? Whereas before they couldn't, they didn't believe they could do it. It often ties right into that, all is lost moment right before the climactic scene too. This all kind of happens all at once. And this is what we end up with ripping through the pages as readers, right? Because we're so engaged. The climactic twist, the mystery is going to be solved mostly. The story question is definitely going to be answered, but we might have a new question about who the true villain is. So if your story question is who murdered this person that I found on page 1, that might be answered at the 85% mark, but we might, understand, oh, they were actually hired by somebody else to do it, or they were being forced to do it, or whatever. This is what leads you into nicely the final twist, which is the reveal of the true villain. It's where the truth comes out. So this, again, this cardboard, we have this true villain underneath. This is where they like poke up through, they punch through the cardboard, however you want to look at it, and say, hi, it's me. You know, I'm the one who was doing this whole thing. It's where you have the entire mystery wrapped up, everything gets explained, and that chaos to order phenomenon that all MTS books have, it's for now. So they might run off, they might escape, but everything has been solved for now. Which means,
I have a quick question for you.
yes,
Derailing.
yeah,
When you were talking about the story question being answered at like 85%, but then there is
yeah,
something, I mean, ordinarily you'd think, oh, well, story questions answered, book over, right? Like, or why would I
yeah.
keep reading? Because, so would you say like that there's actually what it is there was misdirection all along in the story question, and this is like the real story question, or is there
Ooh.
a story question? Um,
Yeah, I've never heard it phrased exactly like that, but 10,000% agree. That's exactly what it is. Because if you look at mystery, thriller, and suspense books, if you read the back cover copy, if you read the title, if you look at the covers, they're misdirecting you from the second you pick that up. The Last Mrs. Parrish, another deep dive we have done, fabulous job at this. Like you pick up the back of the book and you read it and you're like, oh, it's going to be a story about this. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm not going to spoil it. But you know, as you move through, you are being misdirected by the author through the protagonist for the entire story. And so, yes, you might solve who did the murder or who did the bad thing, but ultimately, that's not really the question that this person is answering. It's what's really going on, which is again that villain popping up through the surface of the cardboard. So all this is to say that villains are just as important as the protagonist. This is my soapbox that I've been on for the last year, in every public forum that I've been able to talk about it. It's not like I think that villains are all that interesting. I actually think that people who do evil stuff is sort of terrifying, and I don't really want to spend my time thinking about it. But I find the psychology of and the puzzle that you have to make to create an MTS novel to be absolutely, completely engaging. And so to do that, we have to know what the villain is doing. So we have to understand their logic. We have to understand their motivations, their goals. We have to know what their journey is so that we can actually create these clues that pop up to the surface for the protagonist to receive. So that when the protagonist actually finds this truth, it becomes twisty because they have made all kinds of assumptions that were not already there. So why are twists important? I kind of alluded to this earlier, but readers expect them. You got to have at least 3 in modern thrillers, I would say, and mystery and suspense as well, if not more than that. I've read some recently where it was just like, you get to the climactic scene, you're like, oh, okay. And then it's like, no, wait, no, wait, no, wait. And it just keeps going up until the very end. And then you're like, you finish the book and you're like, oh my God, what did I just read? What's happening? You know, and
I think that
that,
that's true of every single deep dive book that we have done so
yes.
far, which we again we'll be releasing them soon, but there's so many more than 3. It just is almost nonstop.
Yeah, it's you know, I strive to write this way. I strive for all my clients to write this way. You know it when you see it, right? It's super engaging and it just hooks you in. And it's when you pick up the book before bedtime and it's 3 a.m. and you finish it and you're like, well, damn, okay, I guess I'm not sleeping tonight because I have so much to think about. But you really want to give the readers what they want. And so the way to approach this, I think, is to think about the villain's journey and really figure that out so that you're kind of approaching the entire story backwards. Sometimes it helps to think about it almost like a pyramid. You know, there's like several different ways of looking at the same story. So one face of the pyramid is the author's POV. We know everything. The other is, and that's not going to be on the page at all, but you're the one who has to know it all. You have your protagonist way of looking at it. You have the best friend's way of looking at it. You have the villain's way of looking at it. And then you've got, you know, maybe the true villain's way of looking at it. You might have a cop in there, you know, it kind of depends on what you're writing. But the the concept of a mystery thriller and suspense novel just being like, oh, I'm going to write this like consecutive story about someone uncovering what's actually going on with their murder. Yes, but it really, really helps to understand what the person doing bad things is doing so that you don't end up writing yourself into a corner and ending up with a climactic scene that falls flat. But there are ways out of that if you end up there. So just kind of high level genre expectations. The mystery's got to be solved. We need to know what happened. There's going to be some moment. It's going to feel cheesy when you write it, but it's necessary for the reader where the protagonist is like, well, why did you do this thing? And the villain is like, haha, I did it because of these reasons, you know, but that is super satisfying for the reader because it allows them to look back at everything they've just read and look at the clues that they misinterpreted and then think, oh, it was on the page and I didn't see it that way because the protagonist thought something else and I was misled. Life and death stakes, unless you're writing a cozy mystery, even then there's usually going to be a dead body or two. And there may not be someone like chasing them, but there's going to be some kind of tension that exists throughout. There's going to be suspense, it's going to be twisty. And in chapter 1, something scary is going to happen of some sort. It may not be the actual inciting incident, but you're going to have some themes of something scary happening. You're going to have some oomph. You know, I don't pick up a thriller to be led nicely through, I don't know, Kerry, help me out, examples. I was going to say like women's fiction, but I love women's fiction and I read it for different reasons.
Well, that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
a different expectation, right? I think we read
Yeah.
fiction or other kinds of fiction for different reasons, whether it's escapism or seeing a
Yeah.
process a life problem or something like that. That is not what we come to MTS for.
No, we come to MTS to read about murder, which, sometimes you just gotta relax and read about a murder. So if that resonates for you, you're with your people. So suspense in itself, I like to define as the stickiness of the novel. So we know how it ends. We know that chaos is going to be brought to order. We understand from the genre expectation that this crime is going to be solved and this supervillain is going to be taken down. I am reading it to know how it all goes down. What are the twists and turns? What kind of journey are you going to lead me on? I want to be able to not stop turning those pages. And we don't know how we're going to get there. So we're along for the journey. This is a friendly reminder that I put at the end of every single presentation I ever give. Do not compare yourself to books in the bookstore. They have gone through 17 pairs of professional eyeballs. They have gone through so many levels of beta readings and revisions and, usually several sets of editors. And I find myself doing this too. It can feel kind of disheartening to read a book like The Last Word by Taylor Adams and be like, damn, am I ever going to get there? Yes, you will, because you're going to keep trying because writers write, and this is why we're all here. So there's your friendly reminder. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening. We're going to go into the AMA right now. This is all the information about the retreat. And I'm going to email the link with this recording out, which you are free to forward to your friends who couldn't make it. Please encourage them to sign up for the email list. We're not just here to sell the retreat. Of course, we would love it if you all came. But we're also here to just talk about craft and nerd out about MTS in general, because we really love talking about this stuff. So that is everything I have.
So I will just jump in too, and I want to sort of emphasize something that you had in one of your slides, but you were on such a good roll, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, thank
I
you.
think we are so trained as writers to know so much about our protagonist and what our protagonist is up to. And, there's those ridiculous character worksheets that I do not subscribe to, but it's like, if you don't know their favorite flavor of ice cream, you don't know enough.
Yeah.
You must know all the things. And I think you don't need to know their favorite ice cream flavor unless for some reason that is relevant to your book. But the protagonist or the antagonist or villain, and they can be interchangeable. They are not always. They do not have to be. So that is something to be mindful of. But when you're writing MTS in particular, knowing as much about your villain, I hope this is what you picked up from what Sam was saying, is treat your villain like your protagonist in a way. You need to know as much or more about them and what they're up to in order to be able to really craft these satisfying twists. And I always subscribed to this. As soon as you said this to me, Sam, I was like, oh, duh. Of course, it makes so much sense. But some of you know I am crafting a little baby book right now, and it's a murder mystery among many other things. And thinking through my villain just opened up so many doors to me that I didn't realize that I even needed to be aware of. So I would, anytime you do a character worksheet or you're thinking about doing a deep dive on character, they are just as important as your protagonist. So do that deep dive, get to know them, know what they're up to, know their motivations, know how they're steering the ship from below the iceberg or below the cardboard or however.
Yeah, whatever works for you. As I was using water for a while, but then that got weird because I kept thinking about whales and it got confusing. So now I just use cardboard. Another way of looking at it is, what was the villain doing before the protagonist came along and ruined their life? That's really what a mystery is they were happily doing all the bad things that they were getting away with it. Everything was hunky-dory for them. And then your protagonist bops in and is like, I'm here, I'm here to ruin your life and solve this and stop you. And then it becomes a back and forth of what's actually going on between them. So Yeah. Anyone have any questions? Anyone want to ask anything about their own? Amy Goldmacher, hi. So
Hey,
good to see
Santa.
you.
Hello.
Um,
Hey.
Hi. Yeah, tell us what's up.
Well, thanks for doing this. This is super cool. Love nerding out
Amazing.
with fellow nerds. Um, so my question is, let's see if I can get it into the form of a question. I'm struggling with the genre that I'm writing in. I'm thinking it's psychological horror or psychological thriller. Um, so how do the twists map onto that? Is that a fair question to ask?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, psychological thriller and psychological horror, uh, they both also have the expectation of having a lot of twists, I would say. And if you just want something to sort of map on, I think the 50, 85, 98 is a really good thing to aim for. The 50% seems to be sort of the don't break it rule. I would say the final twist, you can have several between the climactic twist and the final. Doesn't always have to be on the last page. And I can't name any books even without spoiling it and being like, there's a good, really good final twist. But like, you know it when you see it, right? And so you may have several, you may have constant twists between 50 and 85, but your climactic scene is going to have some kind of huge reveal of the villain's truth that is going to be fundamental to the story. The midpoint's going to be something that, again, that hard right turn, that could be reader expectations. Again, I won't name the book, but we did a deep dive on it, where you could completely subvert what's actually going on. Yeah, it's a good map. I think it applies to all kinds of stuff. And I low key theorize that it could be applied to every single genre, probably maybe not literary, but certainly in terms of engaging fiction, engaging genre fiction, you do want to think about, what's happening in the middle, what makes this story take a turn, what happens in the climactic scene, what's being revealed there that wasn't revealed before, and what did I think up until that point? Um, I don't know, romance doesn't often have a final twist, but sometimes it does. It can be fun. Does that
Well,
help?
if you think about the frameworks like a save the cat, right? The 50% is like a false victory or a false defeat. And
Yeah.
really what is that in it's a twist in another, in another sort of wrapping, or it certainly can be a twist because it's upending an expectation, right? Or you're saying, oh, this was a defeat, but we know as the writers it wasn't really a defeat. So now we're putting them on a different trajectory. So we've made that hard left turn. And that, like, so to your point, Sam, about it being true for any genre, I think that sort of expectation is there is an upheaval at that point. We may not call it a
Yeah.
twist in genres, but there is a change of course at that point, and that's exactly what it's all about.
Yeah, I would say with psychological horror, it gets a little, if you don't have a sentient villain, if the person is battling their own mind or they're battling like, the woods or something, it gets a little harder to talk about the villain's journey, but you're still going to have these like things that pop up at these times that you can aim for where the reader and the protagonist do not expect them until they're revealed.
Mm.
Yeah.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Hi, Olivia. Good to see you.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Good. I sure
Okay,
can.
great. Okay, so my question is, so many books now have multiple POV, and sometimes multiple protagonists. The book I'm working on right now has three protagonists. I do have an alpha protagonist, but are we thinking that those twists, and they're all on different journeys that will come together at the end, right? But
Amazing.
they're not necessarily interacting the whole time. So kind of three different stories. So would we think about doing the twists for each character at those points, or is it just really like the entire book as a whole, one of the characters makes this big turn?
Yeah, what a good question. No one's ever asked me that before. So I do have an answer though. So I would say that like a good model would be like the Douglas Preston Lincoln Child books for you. They often have, God, I counted once and I think they had 8 POVs, which is just unheard of. Like if anyone came to me with that as in a coaching perspective, I'd be like, no, 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 just back that
Too
right
much.
down. But it totally works because the reader, when you hop into one of their stories, you're like, yeah, okay, I'm okay not knowing how all these people connect, and I'm okay of them all having their own separate journeys up until the moment that they join up, which I know they will. Or there's
Mhm.
going to be a common enemy and they're both coming at it from the same time. Maybe they don't even talk, but
Yeah, yeah.
the story has like a central golden line, to use Jenny Nash's words.
Yeah.
that pulls everything along, right? And so there will be some kind of central villain in that case that's doing all these things, and your three other storylines are going to be interweaving throughout it. I think it could be a good exercise to see if you can put a twist in each of theirs, but that climactic twist and or the final twist are probably going to involve most of them,
All of
if not
them.
all.
Yeah. I was thinking more the 50% mark,
Yeah,
right? Like,
totally. Yeah, I would
yeah.
aim for that because if you, I mean, you're not going to have, I mean, that you'd have like a 400,000 word book if you gave them all their full novel, right?
Yeah,
And
no.
so, it's going to be mostly based on your alpha protagonist, and then the other two are going to have their own journeys, but they're all going to have things that happen to them in the middle of the book that change the course of their trajectory. And that could be the same thing. It could be they're learning the same thing, but they think
Paths
different
with it,
things about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Cool
Thank you.
book. Can't wait to read it. Carrie, anything else on that? That was a really good question. Can you think of anything you would add?
No, I mean, I think you covered most of it. I was thinking, so the baby book is a dual timeline. And so Olivia, I'm thinking about that same question, although I do not have multiple protagonists, just I have the two storylines. So I feel like I'm not that brave. I'm not as brave as you, but, but I am trying to do that. I think is like to make sure that is not just a twist in one storyline. And I don't know that I'll be able to entirely pull it off. I know I have my 50, my 85, and my 98%, thanks to Sam. But if I can feed some more in there and make sure that like I'm honestly looking at each of them as like a 45,000 word novel of their own. So I'm trying to make sure that they hold together as books on their own and then bring them together and be like, all right, well, now you have to hold together as a whole. So that is what I think we do to ourselves when we have multiple POVs or multiple timelines, and multiple anything is just, making sure that there's a cohesive story within each of those pieces and then making sure that they work together to complement each other.
Yeah, great answer. Anyone else have any questions? Anyone else have any questions or thoughts or literally anything? We'll try to shut this off at the 45-minute mark just to give you all your hour back. But that means we have 7 minutes. So, oh, there's Linda. Hi, Linda.
Hello. Hoping my cat's tail stays out of the camera.
We love cats in this world.
Right. So actually not a question. I'm just really thinking over what you had to say, but the way you said that the villain, it's really about how did the protagonist ruin the villain's life. I mean, I just had an aha moment.
Oh, amazing.
And it because I've just finished, actually it's my second, I'm not published yet, my second thriller, and
Awesome.
I have 5 point of views. I started with 8, that's too many. And then but I've been rethinking as I've gone back and I've been reworking it, and I'm thinking about my next one. And I'm a pantser, so I'm not the greatest plotter, but I've been trying to think ahead about it and who the villain is. And just when you said that, it just stuff fell into place. So thank you for that. That's wonderful.
Oh, you give me chills. I'm so glad to hear it. That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm really happy.
And I'm coming to Thriller Fest too.
Yay! Yay for Thriller Fest.
Yep.
Yeah, we have a bunch of Thriller Fest people here.
I was gonna say, like at least 3 of us just went like, yes. So
yeah,
it's sure so fun.
You will not sleep. You will be exhausted. It's a lot, but it is so fun.
It is so fun.
All right, Rob, I think you were next, and then Frank.
Sure. Theoretical question here about, in terms of the twists that you have as you're moving forward in the story, do they need to keep, in terms of the weight of them, the climax that's involved in each of them, do they need to keep building on each other in terms of their emotional power? Or is that 50% one, could that be a really big one, but then you probably want your end, you want the climax obviously to be the biggest, but something that's a twist in between, is it okay for it to feel not as emotionally weighty? Just kind of wondering.
What a great question. So I would say when I think about the structure of a thriller and I'm, looking at it from like all these different perspectives, the emotional arc is one of those linear ones, right? And so it's almost like a negative arc typically with thrillers. And Kerry, jump in here if you disagree, but like usually there's something that somebody believes that is bad about themselves. Like I don't deserve love is a super common one, or I can't do this, or I'm not strong enough, or I can't trust myself, or whatever it is, right? And the misbelief you can look at it like a downward slide where it's like, oh, I believe this more and more and more and more and more, right up until that climactic aha moment. And then it's like, tackle the thing. And so the midpoint twist is almost like not really related to the emotionality of it. If anything, it could be like, it could maximize or like amplify.
I think it could reinforce it is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, because like you don't ideally, I mean, there's no should. You'll hear Kerry and I say that quite a bit. And if it works, it works, right? Like story is story, and this is your vision, and we're just here to sort of help shepherd that. However, it's much more satisfying, I think, for the reader to have this emotional aha moment be like combined with the most suspenseful part of the book, which is the climactic scene. And so you kind of don't want to let them figure it out before then. Because you want to save that maximum engagement to be all at once in this climactic scene, because that's what keeps people turning the page, right? We don't know if they're going to figure it out. We might be able to see like, of course you're smart enough, of course you deserve love, but they're not going to, or it's fiction, right? We're making their lives terrible. So yeah, I would say the 50% one amplifies the misbelief. That was really maximizes it. And then the climactic is where they face it. And then the final twist is going to be something where it's like, well, I know what I'm doing and I'm going to conquer this, but it's like unexpected in terms of the villain's truth. Does that help? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly there are different emotional weights of different twists, and it certainly, the climax should be the most weighty one emotionally. And that 50% one, when it changes the track of your story, has to be a pretty emotionally strong one as well.
Yeah.
And then the ones that are in between it's hard, I mean, to keep building and building and building all the way to between those two poles. It seems like it's a hard thing to do. So it's okay if your mid twist between your 50% and your climax are a little less twisty. I don't know.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, I would say that your goal between 50 and 85 is to drive energy toward the climactic scene and remove every other possible logical out. Right. So one of the most frustrating things that I have when I read thrillers is like, well, why didn't they just turn left instead of right? Or like, why did they go chase after this serial killer in the woods instead of being like, that's really dumb, I'm going to go this way. Like you want to remove any sort of option where the reader can be like, well, why didn't they just do this? And in that way, it may not be very emotional. Not every, I don't know, if I'm walking through the woods and there's a serial killer chasing me, I'm not going to stop to think about my misbeliefs about myself, right? Because I'm going to be focused on surviving. But if I have a minute where I've hidden in a cave and I have a rock knife or whatever, and I'm thinking I can't do this, then I might take a minute and be like, can I do this? I'm going to hype myself up, and that's a really terrible example, but hopefully that sort of illustrated it. Like you're not going to have every reveal be like, how do I feel about myself right now? And I'm being hyperbolic on purpose. I'm not saying you would ever do that, but you know what I mean? Like the story is going to be the story, and there's going to be moments where you have interiority and reflection, but it's not going to be like a check-in every time there's some kind of reveal.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Frank, do you want to come back up, or did we answer your question? Maybe he had to hop off.
Thanks.
Hi.
I had two questions, and like Linda, I really love what you said about how the protagonist is destroying the villain's life. So yeah, it's a great way of sort of looking at it. Where the villain is the protagonist. Well, we're all heroes in our own stories. So practically, how do you do that? Should I just open up a Scrivener file and just start writing a story as if it was my bad guy's life? And I won't write like 80,000 words, but yeah, whatever.
Right. Yeah. So I like to use the Pixar story spine method. It's another Jenny Nash Author Accelerator recommendation. And I fell in love with it because it allows you to sort of see like that super high level flow of the story from the villain's perspective. And I like to think of it like, your villain's been doing something probably for quite a while. If it's like a long game revenge plan, they've been thinking about this since they were 13 and got kicked off the volleyball team because your protagonist took it from them or whatever, right? Or maybe it's something where they've been happily killing people all along until the protagonist stumbles across the body that ends up ruining their flow. It's a disgusting conversation, but you know what I mean. Anyway, you're gonna have like this story spine is like once upon a time there was this person, one day they did this because of that, because of that, because of that, and you're gonna have this logical progression. Your protagonist and your story may not enter up until the climactic moment for the villain. It's like, and and then one day this happened, and that's when your protagonist found the body that ruined everything. So the overlap might be almost be like this, or it could be like this, or it could be like this. If these are both Pixar story spines, here's your villain, here's your protagonist. But I find that looking at it from the super high level, like it helps to discovery, right? Linda, you were talking about pantsing. Like I'm a plantser. I like to discovery write until I figure out who I'm writing about, and then I go back and I start thinking about it. But I've found that my villain that I planned on was not my villain before, because sometimes this happens when you write and it's totally okay. It just means you have to think through who this real person is who's beneath the surface and poking their knives up through the cardboard. So yeah, I would just, give it a high level shot and figure out what your villain's up to and why. And then these intersection points where these poke through holes, those are your intersection points where your protagonist is going to see it on the page. Because if they don't see it, the reader's not going to see it, and it becomes very unsatisfying. We'll talk more about that in another craft webinar. But those intersection points become very important, right? And if you don't know what your villain's doing and why, you don't know where the intersection points are, and you can't have your protagonist experience them.
That's
I'll
great.
just throw in too, like the planning that I usually do is like, I am a bit of a planner too, although the more I write, the more I want to be a planner, because I feel like it's more efficient and we all have limited writing time. But all that said is like whatever planning I do for my protagonist, and I am a big fan of Lisa Cron as well, and her books of like Wired for Story and Story Genius. She goes really deep in character and how brain science works around that. And any of those questions that I would write about, or that I would answer about my protagonist, like motivations and goals and things, like I would do that same work for my villain, because I think like that's where you get to know where you're starting to understand what's really driving them and motivating them, and how those then like your protagonist and your villain can clash at those points. It just really starts to come naturally. You'll start to see those pieces of the story spine that Sam was talking about, like those events where they're coming together, the head's getting poked up. So yeah. And fair warning with that, like when you start diving into villain brains, particularly the more evil they are, the more uncomfortable it gets. And so set a timer. Do it for 10 minutes and then go do something like play with the cat or whatever, because you're going to need a break. It's really dark. And I've definitely like bummed myself out and had to go take a walk yes, exactly, Linda.
Why do you think it's taking me so long to write this freaking thing?
Exactly. It's hard. We have chosen a very difficult genre, everybody. So, but we're all here together.
Final quick question.
Yeah.
At what point does psychological suspense become psychological horror? Because there's some aspects of some of the works I've seen where it really sort of edges into horror.
Yeah. So that honestly is just an irritating answer, but I think it depends on the story. It's one of those things where you kind of know it when you see it. Like horror to me is exploring a fate worse than death. It's not just that you're going to die. It's that you might have your mind taken away from you. You might be pulled into hell. You might be, or whatever, you believe in. But like, it's not just that it ends and it's done. It's something far scarier than that. And so psychological horror is like, can you trust your own brain and what's actually going on around us? And like, is it far scarier than anyone ever imagined? Is kind of how I would define horror. Whereas psychological suspense is more like in the here and now, you've usually got somebody who's intent on doing a bad thing. And the suspense part of it is like, will they achieve that thing? Does that help? Kerry, do you have anything to, that's a really good question, Frank.
It is, and I've been thinking a lot about it too, because sorry, my way of relating is to like think through my own processes around this stuff. And so I got the same question about my book of like, are you writing horror? Are you writing mystery? What are you writing? Because there's a ghost. And when people started talking about it as horror, I was like, oh, I don't envision this as horror at all. But I guess there are elements of that because of what you were just saying, Sam, about like, can you trust your own brain and what's really happening? There's things that are manipulating the person that are out of their control, which I guess is not a good way of putting that, but because
no, that's a perfect way of putting it. Yeah.
And you know, it's like that the thriller being like, you know who the person is, or you know what the question is whether they're going to be able to resolve the thing or not before like the bomb blows up and kills the world. Whereas with horror, it's like, well, what is really happening here? You know, I've just revisited a couple of Stephen King books, old ones, and it is all, what was the one? I can't find it right now, but it was the one where the guy has like a twin that he doesn't know about, that he's conjured out of his brain. And it's like, it is all about like, well, what is really happening? Is this really exist? Or is this just really all in his head? And how is it working? So it becomes, what is going to happen with that? And how does that psychological piece of it get resolved, as opposed to, is the bomb going to go off?
Yeah. So I would say like a classic example of this, and I'm kind of pulling Darcy Coates writes great psychological horror. If anybody is curious, I adore her books. You know what you're going to get, and don't read them before you go to sleep, is my advice. She's incredible. Haunted house stuff. Yeah. But I would say like the climactic scene with her, there's always like a 50% where like the person can't get away, right? They think they can get away and then they can't. So now they're in it, right? Now they have to like go after whatever they're facing. And it could be a demon or a ghost or whatever terrifying thing she has and whatever in the story. The climactic scene is where she faces the thing and takes it down or stops it or whatever. And then I might be making this up, so don't quote me, but I feel like there's a final twist typically with her where it's like, oh, it followed you out. It is behind you in the car. And then it's like, now then you end the book, right? And that's psychological horror to me, is that there's not really a resolution. It's like we've defeated the thing that was in the house and we've answered that story question, but like, oh boy, what's going on in that corner? And here I am having to deal with it. And that's that open-ended. I think that's a hallmark of psychological horror, is like, okay, well, what if? Yeah, love it.
Note to self, we probably should do a genre one. Note to self and Sam, let's do a genre talk.
Perfect. All right, y'all, I think I'm going to wrap it up just so we don't go over the hour. But if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email us. It's just Kerry and I on the end of that email, and we're here to help and get to know you all, and we want you to get to know us. We understand that retreats are an investment in yourself and your writing and your time, and time is precious. And so we want you to know who we are and what to expect. And we really hope that you come, but even if you just come to these and talk to us, we love that too. So
we do.
Yeah. Thank you so much all for being here. This has been just beyond my wildest expectations, honestly, for our first one.
Thank you, everybody. This has been great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. See y'all next time, hopefully.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
At least